Folsom was one of many California Sierra foothill towns that flourished after the discovery of gold in Coloma in 1848. Evidence of mining still exists in Folsom today among the oak-covered hills. Gold was mined by several methods, one of which was known as sluice mining. Little evidence of this type of mining exists today, with the exception of Folsom's Natoma Ground Sluice Diggings, often called the Chinese diggings. The Folsom site is one of the only remaining intact areas of this type of mining in California, with the unique herringbone pattern of trenches emptying into a main ditch and tunnel. It has been listed as a cultural resource on the National Register of Historical Places. In sluice mining, the method used to extract gold from the Natoma Ground Sluice Diggings, a short box was constructed with riffles or crosspieces inserted along the bottom. These would trap the heavier gold as water washed over the dirt and rock that was shoveled into the box. Sluice boxes could be strung together in a trench, allowing for larger amounts of dirt, rock, and gravel to be washed. Long toms were another version of the sluice boxes and were several feet long, most likely inserted into the trenches where water was pumped over the dirt and gravel. Ground sluice mining penetrated deeper into the earth than panning, with the intent of reaching bedrock. It was usually performed in winter and spring when more water was available. As cobbles were excavated, they were stacked along the edge of the trench. The resulting retaining wall served as a water-diverting device. Russ Kurz, a longtime miner in the foothills of Northern California, explains sluice mining.
And what they would do is that they would take it and have these long toms. If they didn't have a spring, then they had to bring the water by bucket and dump it into the troughs. And in these troughs, they would run down and also go across their sluice runs, their sluice boxes. Actually, what it was is that they're dumping the dirt into the sluice. They dump the water into the tom, and then it runs down and it filters all of the dirt going back down to the river. So what they're doing is that it's separating the gold from the dirt. And that way they're able to pick the gold out of their sluice boxes. But they all had to do it by hand, dumping it. And the Chinese developed a hand pump. And what they did was that they were doing the diggings, but they had one man that sat in the back and he kept working his hand pump, pumping the water from the river, and the water was just continually running, and they were just doing the diggings, and they made so much more gold, and because at the same time they worked longer hours, and they worked harder at what they were doing, and they didn't drink. So that made a big difference all the way around.
Oh, that's
so
great.
That's
Herringbone pattern sluice mining sites were uncommon. Comprised of a main trench that served as a drainage system, the main trench was intersected by several bedrock drains with rows of hand-piled rocks at an angle to the drains. The Natoma Ground Sluice Diggings were drained by a tunnel that emptied into the American River, now Lake Natoma. The story of the Natoma Ground Sluice Diggings is a complex one, not without controversy, about the origins of the diggings and who mined them. Historians believe that the area may have been initially mined on land likely leased by the Folsom Development Company. After little or no gold was produced, it may have been re-explored and mined by others at a later time. One of the last placer mines in the area, the Natoma Ground Sluice Diggings, dates to 1903. Although some portions of the area may have been mined as early as the 1880s, mining clearly ended by 1908. The site had never been formally recorded or mapped during the time period it was mined. Local hearsay, as told by past Folsom residents, has fostered the notion that the Natoma Ground Sluice Diggings were constructed and mined solely by Chinese immigrants. Little hard evidence exists to support this belief. Carrie Tessera, a longtime Folsom resident, remembers her mother describing Chinese miners walking to their work site in about 1913. Bill Rumsey, at one time known as Folsom's official historian, recalled Chinese working in the diggings in the early 1900s. However, former Mayor Jack Kipp recalled there were many Portuguese miners who worked the Ground Sluice mine. Records from the 1850s and early 1900s show that Folsom supported a Chinese population of over 1,200 and that Chinese workers made up a larger proportion of the workers in the gold mines. It was well known that the Chinese would re-explore mines that had been abandoned by other companies when they were felt to produce too little gold. An interview with Chris Chalupka, retired California state archaeologist, reveals why the development of the Natoma Ground Sluice Diggings by Chinese miners was unlikely. Do you know if that herringbone pattern type sluice mining was typical of Chinese mining?
It doesn't appear to be typical of Chinese mining. And Chinese miners usually adapted more efficient methods of the 49ers, like the cradle or the sluice box or the long tom. But I know of no reference in the literature of Chinese actually using that style of mining.
The most recent professional review of the history of these diggings was performed by archaeologist Susan Lindstrom in 1988 as part of the analysis prior to the residential and commercial development of the area now known as Natoma Station. Lindstrom noted that the site is or is not of Chinese origin may never be known. Suffice it to say that the ethnic composition of the labor force most likely was a combination of Euro-Americans and Chinese. This statement is supported by records of miners employed by various local companies that included Chinese, Irish, Portuguese, and other European surnames. Though no artifacts per se have been recorded as discovered at the site, the features that exist, bedrock depth trenches and the herringbone pattern, are considered to be significant artifacts in themselves and a powerful visual indicator of the time-specific technological activity that took place on the site. Through the preservation efforts of private citizens, particularly Betsy Strand in the 1980s, the city of Folsom can be proud of preserving this unique perspective on the past. These resources are fragile and their existence is threatened by natural deterioration processes and the ongoing intrusion of curiosity seekers into the site. The development of an interpretive center and more formal viewing area is now planned in order to preserve and protect the site.